The views, comments, stories, and opinions shared within this podcast are our own, or those of our guests, and in no way represent the views of the companies, associations, or organizations that any of us may work for or represent. All stories, events, and tales shared within this episode may or may not have happened in the manner in which they were told. They may or may not have even happened at all. The details have been changed to protect the innocent and the guilty alike. This is Squawk Ident. You're listening to Squawk Ident, an aviation podcast that explores the many pathways to an aviation profession, the challenges that a professional aviator can expect in today's marketplace, and we share many stories along the way. I'm your host, Aviator Tony, a professional airline pilot, currently flying for a U.S. legacy airline with close to 20 years on the flight line. Welcome aboard Flight 108 of the Squawk Ident podcast, recorded on the 2nd of May, 2022, from the Aviator Sound Studios from somewhere in Southern California. On today's flight, we're joined by Captain Roger and Rob D. Together, we will hear all about some big news from Captain Roger about his new type rating and the new jet to his growing fleet of corporate aircraft. We also are very excited to have on the show a Miami-based A320 captain for Legacy Airlines. She takes us along as she shares her journey with us in aviation. From plane spotting with her family at Miami International to overcoming extreme biases towards women in the industry. She is a journalism graduate from Miami-Dade College, a licensed real estate agent in Palm Beach, Florida, and a mother, a captain. So she wears a lot of different hats every single day. We are pleased to welcome to our show our featured guest, Captain Adilia Roberts. All this and more on this very special episode of the Squawk Ident podcast. So stay with us as we run our final checks and prepare to push off the gate. Flight 108 of the Squawk Ident podcast is officially underway. Joining us today is an exceptional aviator and co-host. He is a professional CFI, II, and MEI flight instructor, former Embraer 145 airline pilot, a King Air instructor, Dassault Falcon 900 EZ 2000, and now a G650 commander, a captain, a director of flight operations, and a corporate operator as well. He joins us fresh off a trip from immediately following a 3-week long training course in Long Beach, California. From somewhere in San Diego, California, please help me in welcoming back to the show, Captain Roger. Captain, how you doing?
I'm doing all right, Tony. It's good to be back. I've been out for a little while. Kind of spoiled my surprise there. But I've been studying hard.
Well, it wasn't a surprise to us. We've kept it a surprise to all our listeners out there. We told everyone something big was happening with you.
You did.
You know, we teased it now for quite some time.
Yeah, it's been in the works for a little while now, and then it's actually happened. I have more letters on my certificate now.
Do you have like multiple certificates now to fit in all your type ratings?
Almost. They didn't take my last one, so now I guess I do have 2 certificates. I have the one from before, and then I have the paper one, and then I'll get another one. I'm gonna start framing them and putting them on my wall.
Yeah, for sure. I always get a kick when I go to training, which I actually have recurrent training next month. I just got a notification just before the show that, hey, your CQT is coming up in June. So I'm going to have to start getting ready for that, do a little bit of studying. And now Rob's kind of shaking his head going, studying? What are you talking about? Mainline pilots don't study. Yes, we do. Yes, we do. But I always get a kick when I'm set up with a captain in the simulator. You're one-on-one. You have a captain yourself as a first officer, and then you have your sim instructor. And the first thing they do is they check your certificates, your medical, make sure you brought everything, you're current, because that's really one of the only times that the company can certify that you have been up to date and everything is on par. And I always get a kick out of seeing the pilot next to me pull out multiple pieces of plastic because their type ratings don't fit on one license. They have to pull out 2 or sometimes 3. And you're like, whoa, let me see that.
I'm not quite that far yet, although it was kind of interesting. I was thinking about it. Other than the airlines, I've only done 1 recurrent in my whole career.
Oh.
Because I keep doing initials.
Yeah.
I've only done 1 recurrent.
Oh, wow. So
now I need to do another recurrent here this year. But other than that, because of the combination of Part 91 and the way that the rules are just slightly different, they're not quite as stringent as they are at 135 and 121. I've only done 1 recurrent class.
So your BFR, is it your biannual flight review?
Yeah, because I do an initial every year.
Uh-huh. So now let me get this straight. So you have multiple type ratings. You're flying jets around the country, around the world. And you're normally, as a licensed pilot, a private pilot, commercial pilot, whatever, every 2 years, you'll have to have your biannual flight review where you go up with an instructor and you do some required maneuvers. You demonstrate that you can do the stalls and turns around a point, whatever is in the BFR. And you have to demonstrate, I think, 3 landings. And then you get signed off. You're good to go for another 2 years. You've been checked out. Your recurrent training, per se. But if you get a type rating on a new aircraft, does that BFR clock start over, regardless of what airplane you just got the type rating in?
Correct. And it also serves as basically an IPC, an instrument proficiency check too. So you start your instrument currency all over again. You start your BFR clock all over again. And then it also kind of, because each turbojet airplane has different training requirements also. So you have to kind of keep track on base months, and you have to keep track of your base months on each, because in my case, I now have 3 active type ratings. I have 3 active type ratings that I fly right now. And each one you have to do specifically every 2 years, but you have to do something every year.
Aha.
So yeah, there's multiple things that you have to keep track of, and making sure that your currency in one airplane, it doesn't match up with something else, but it's all kind of convoluted. I don't want to stress your guys' minds out, because I know that you have departments and buildings that work on this for you, so they can send you text messages. Hey, by the way,
you have
first officer Tony, you need to show up at recurrent.
Oh, I guess I have recurrent next month.
Don't forget.
Didn't even know. Yeah. Yeah. The only thing I have to do is once or twice a flight sequence. I go right into that flight management system in my aircraft after a landing, like I did last night at midnight coming into Los Angeles. And it's funny because we're coming in on final, and I told the captain, all right, here's what's going to happen. Okay. And my captain and I were tired. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the show, but we're just tired, had a pretty difficult 4-day trip. It was fun, but it was just all red eyes and late night flying. And he looks at me, he's like, yeah, man, I'm tired. I'm like, well, we'll get it on the ground. Don't worry. It's my leg. I'm flying. This is what's going to happen. Here's what's going to happen on the landing. The left main's going to touch down, and it's going to go, and then the right main is going to touch down like a second or 2 later, and it's going to go, and then the nose is going to come down, and it's going to go, and then you're going to go, ah. And he just started laughing. He was awake after that. He was like, okay, dude, all right. I didn't pull it off. No, I didn't pull it off. Yeah, so then I'll just type into my flight management computer a message with my employee number, and it goes into what we call DEX, into the mainframe computer for legacy airlines, and that's where my landings get updated. So that's how I stay current with my landings. They assume you're doing instrument ratings or instrument approaches. Then once a year in the sim, you're getting a bunch of those, certified that you're done. So really, we have no BFR, no landing proficiencies, no instrument proficiencies to do, because it's all taken care of within the training of the 121 operation.
Right. I mean, you have them, but it's actually just fulfilled as according to your
training.
Your training. Yep.
Yeah.
Can I just ask one question really quick?
Yeah.
I'm slightly curious. Are you Airbus? What is on a 320? What is the wingspan?
Doesn't matter.
118.9.
118.
I don't know. I was guessing. It's actually under 120, I think, isn't it?
Well, we have 3 types of airplanes that we fly on the Airbus fleet. The A32F.
That's why I asked the 320. Let's not drag this out.
It's the 319, the 320,
we
the 321.
We got a captain and 2 FOs.
I think the wings are all the same except for the winglets and sharklets. I think.
Yeah, it adds
the actual wing itself is the same length. It's just the the sharklet or winglet. It's just a slight variance.
Look it up. I'm not a captain. I don't care.
Yeah. Even as a captain, they don't ask you those specifics, so you know.
This is not Sandpiper Regional Airline Training Center. They're not going to ask you how many freaking fan blades.
That was not a trick question. I had no idea it was going to turn out to be that. I was just kind of like, this airplane is huge, and I was just wondering if from a comparison standpoint, because I'm betting that the wingspan of the Airbus is probably not that much more than the 650.
Yeah, I think it falls under like, because I remember like there's some NOTAMs around the country that, say if you have a wingspan greater than this and you're not allowed to taxi here and stuff like that. And think
that's
it's like
what I have to worry about now.
Yeah, 118 or 120.
Oh man, I feel like I have
I'm looking it up. Hold on.
Let me get my manuals.
Do you have it there? If not, I can pull it out.
Yeah, I bet if you guys had your FMS, you could probably send that to your mainframe computer, and they'd probably answer that for you.
Gosh, you ask these questions, and then I feel like a schmuck.
Roger.
Pull out the notebook.
Well, that's something you're supposed to know.
What?
How big is my wingspan? I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, are you going to hit that windsock over there? I don't know.
Right? I don't know. Is it 118 feet away? Gosh, come on,
I'll
Roger.
race you guys. Okay. The first one that finds it gets a free.
Who knew that this was going to turn into such entertainment?
Wingspan on, I don't know, Wikipedia. Does we count that? Yeah, 117.5 feet. 117.5.
All right, let me get this. Let me get this straight.
Without wing.
This is awesome that this is recording. So let me get this straight. I've got a couple 5th-year FOs, and we have allegedly a newly upgraded captain who just I think went through training for that. And I ask a question, and we go to Wikipedia.
Let me Google it.
Hey, listen. In our world, as long as you're on the yellow line, you're good.
Is that from the training program? Is that
single yellow line?
That is correct.
Not
that is
the
what
double yellow line.
If you stay on the yellow line, you won't hit it.
So if you're on the single,
right.
if you're on the
double yellow line, it's called the light pole 1 departure, and they only have that in Dallas.
Yeah.
And in Miami, if you're not running over all the center line turtles, you're not on the right line.
You're not on the right line. Yeah.
Okay, we can move on now.
What is it?
I rounded it up to 118, but it's 117.5.
And see, I'm still looking in my comply. I still can't find it.
Oh yeah. I'm looking in my printouts, my paper
stuff. In the general, I think.
That'd be a good place to start.
It just happened.
General. It's usually towards the front of the manual.
Yeah.
No.
It's one of those limitations. It's not a limitation. Just one of those things that happened, just stuck in my head because it was the same thing as a 737. Because they're all like about 118 feet wide.
Yeah, I know that the 7.3 is 113.
Yeah,
that's without winglets. But anyway, I'm done. I'm happy.
Drop the mic. Now, Roger, what's the wingspan on? You're the largest aircraft you're currently flying.
100 feet.
Okay, so there you go.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
A nice round number.
The 967 and then 2063. Any other questions?
Yeah, definitely good driver. Yeah, definitely good driver.
I guess I'm going to start studying for recurrent.
I still can't find the freaking diagram in here. Well, with that note, let's carry on and introduce, joining us today, is superb aviator and Squawk Ident co-host. He is a former international professional racquetball champion, a member of the 9G Club, an A&P and avionics tech, an RC aircraft commander, a boat skipper, commercial drone operator, and currently an Airbus pilot for Legacy Airlines. The name we use here on the show is an alias to our employer, a U.S. mainline carrier. A professional airline pilot that uses Wikipedia to find out all of his answers for his aircraft. From Flower Mound, Texas, please help us in welcoming to our show our very own Mr. Rob D. Rob, how you doing?
Hey, how you doing? Hey, I use Wikipedia and YouTube because, YouTube, if it's not on YouTube, then, it doesn't exist. So, yeah.
It's so much easier when you have a video.
Totally.
We have it a picture says 1,000 words.
Yeah.
A video must be a million words.
It's crazy. You got to change like the flapper valve in your toilet, and you go to YouTube and you're like, hi, I'm Larry. Today I'm going to show you how to change a flapper valve in your toilet. And you're like, okay.
Yeah.
So you watch that whole thing and you change your flapper valve.
That's it. Were you changing flapper valves recently there, Rob? Is that
you watch YouTube videos how to fly airplanes? I do that there too. Anyway, Go ahead.
So have you been flying much?
I've been on reserve, of course. I've been flying.
Yeah,
I've got beat up all last month. I had vacation, which I think after our last podcast we talked about, and then right after vacation, I got hammered by the scheduling gods, and just 6 days straight, I flew pretty much all 6 days. So
yeah. Is your
I'm
ringtone
done.
unique for crew scheduling, or
Yeah.
do we call it crew scheduling? Just
Yeah, it's got a different ringtone just so I know who's calling. But yeah, it rang quite a bit.
yeah. For the longest time, I had the Imperial March from Star Wars.
Yeah.
As crew scheduling's ringtone, you know, da da da
Yeah.
da da. Yeah.
I had a siren.
Oh, siren.
Yeah, the siren one's pretty good. Yeah. Yeah, I don't even remember what I have now.
I had one captain, his phone was ringing in the cockpit, and he goes, "Oh, it's crew scheduling." I'm like, "How do you know?" It's like, "Can't you tell?" And the ringtone was a pig going. Like, come on, dude.
Yeah.
Oh, but anyway, yeah. So
Yeah.
I've been flying quite a bit myself. Since our last show, I've had the sequence I just finished, and one before that as well. But this one is what I wanted to talk about. I did a LAX to Miami red eye. Landed in Miami around 5:30 in the morning. Got to the hotel, slept. Usually on these red eyes, I sleep about 5 hours, maybe 6. After that, I'm awake. You know, just is what it is. So I got a little bit of a workout in and got a meal in, and I was getting ready to depart Miami kind of late at night. I think it was around 9:30 or 10 o'clock at night, and went to Lima, Peru, in South America. And it was my first time there. I was very grateful that my captain, who is just a fantastic gentleman who I've flown with a few times before in the past, he had been there like a couple weeks earlier, so he was prepared. And after that, landed in Lima around, I think it was 12:30 in the morning. And man, so interesting to go into another country. And I've really wanted to visit Peru quite a bit in the past. You know, you hear about Machu Picchu and the Amazon and the jungles and the food. I'm a foodie, so yeah. So we made a plan that we were going to get some rest, and then the next morning we were going to meet up and walk around Peru and downtown Lima and find a market. We wanted to pick up some nice alpaca blankets and, you know, gifts for people and for family at home. And then we were going to go find some food. And that's what we did. And just amazing. The temperature was perfect, nice 75 degrees. It was a wonderful town to walk around in. I felt relatively safe. I didn't feel like, you know, you're looking over your shoulder like you do in some of our international destinations. We ended up eating at a fantastic restaurant. Had some traditional, we just kind of picked and chose a few items off the menu. Our waiter was a really nice guy. His name was Junior. And Junior was very good at suggesting to just get this plate, get that plate, and you guys share it. The ceviche, oh my God, that was to die for. And we had some of the traditional purple corn juices and some other thing. Of course, I had to finish it off with a little Peruvian espresso drink. It was nice. Yes, very nice. Head back to the hotel, try to figure out how I was going to pack all the stuff. We ended up eating like kings. Okay, we each had, you know, the main course, an appetizer, a drink and coffee, and, you know, the sweet breads and all the things. So we each ate probably 2 or 3 plates worth of food, and the bill came, and it came out to like 119 solos per person, or soles. And we're like, oh, what's the conversion? Let me see. $35.
Nice.
I was like, I'm going to come here more often. This is nice. You know, and even in the market, there's a lot of outdoor, what do they call it? The Aztec marketplaces and things like that. And, you know, pretty much everyone spoke English or broken English. And there was a few market salespersons that spoke very good English. And of course, you know, you start talking about they're trying to sell you their goods and start talking to them. Oh, you speak very good English, you know. And I was trying my Spanish, and I didn't butcher it too much, I hope. And so, and my captain didn't speak any Spanish, so he kept looking at me, and I'm like, no, she's telling you that this and this. Oh, okay. So yeah, it was a good time. Really had a good time. Going through the airspace was definitely interesting. I've been to like Colombia and been to, you know, different areas in Central America, and this was the most diverse airspace transition that I've ever done to date. You're talking to Havana Center, Kingston Center, all these different centers, and you have to be careful because on the flight plan, it's not like domestic where they just hand you off and you're radar contact, maintain 360, whatever. Some of these centers, you're supposed to call them 10 minutes prior to entering their airspace. And the previous controller is not going to tell you to do that. So you have to kind of keep up with your flight plan. And then on the second radio, the other pilot or, I was telling the captain it because he was flying. All right, your radios, I'm going to call Havana Center. He's, oh, okay. So then I'd have to go and find the frequency on my Jeppesen charts and call them ahead of time and say, okay, we're 10 minutes prior to this fix at 360. And they're like, okay, thanks, Legacy. We'll talk to you in a bit. Okay. So then they switch you over and they hand you off like right at that fix. And now you've given them the heads up. Some of the centers were asking what your registration number was. So you would check in with them at whatever altitude you're at and how many miles you are away from this particular fix as you are going to transition their airspace. And they'll say, okay, what's, Legacy, whatever, 13, 14. What is your registration number? So you had to give them your registration number. And it just was a really unique flight that I have not experienced before in the past. And it was actually really cool to go through that.
Hey, Tony, how about that section of 80 miles where you don't speak to anyone between Kingston and North Panama?
Yeah, and the captain and I didn't know about that. So, we're trying to reach them on the radio. No joy, no joy. And we're like, this is like 20 minutes went by, and we're like, what the heck? And finally, we got them on an alternate frequency, and they said, no, contact us on this frequency, which was completely different, not even on the chart. And we're like, oh, whew. Of course, it's like, it's dark. You have MEAs, MORAs beneath you at 26,000 feet. And you're like, okay, there's mountains under us. We're not talking to anybody, and we're on flight pan. We got GPS and navigation is all working, but I'd feel better if somebody was talking to me.
Wikipedia and YouTube.
That's it, man. I'm telling you.
Legacy doesn't.
People underestimate the
Wi-Fi
benefit of it
internationally. So,
okay, pre-flight planning.
Yeah, well, that's it. Well, the other thing we also had to contend with are drift down routes. Since, like I mentioned, that we had, up to 26,000 foot MORAs, grid MORAs in the area because of the mountainous terrain. So we're required to constantly be putting in these fixes with an 80-mile ring around them. And in the event you lose an engine or depressurization or anything, what you go is you go direct to this first fix that you have pre-programmed on your MFD, and then you follow the route that it depicts to get to an airport, which will maintain critical terrain coverage as you depressurize and descend to land at your emergency destination. So we were constantly doing that. And we also had what they call decision points, or DPs. So a decision point, you'll get that domestically as well here in the US. That's a point where if you lost an engine and had to descend or lost pressurization, had to descend, if the flight plan has a decision point, whatever that may be, it might say 100 miles past this fix is your decision point. And if you're not there yet, you would do a 180-degree turn and follow the same route descending to get back to your emergency destination airport. Or if you're past the decision point, then you would continue on the same flight plan descend. So we had quite a few factors involved in this flight and just found it to be challenging. It made me feel good about being an aviator and having the knowledge and feeling confident that, hey, I know what that is. Hey, yeah, okay, yeah, I know what to do here. Oh, cool. Things that you don't do when you fly the same flight every day. I mean, there are carriers out there where the pilots fly the same route for years, and they're like, know all the frequencies by heart, and it's not really a challenge for them. And yeah, they're perfectly safe. I feel confident. But then you take that aviator and you put them in an absolutely new environment to them. That's when, they start to sit up taller in their seat, and their little hairs might go back up at the back of their neck because they can't get a hold of anyone. What's going on? It's dead zone here. So I enjoy those. Actually, I'm one of those weird pilots that I like that challenge because it makes me feel better at the end of it, that I've learned something new or I've refreshed something. So definitely fun time.
Cool story, man. Nice job.
Thank you. Well, I'm very excited today because our next guest, as we mentioned in the introduction, has overcome some pretty major challenges that most aviators are either oblivious to or they don't feel like it affects them. And she has overcome them. She is a successful captain at Legacy Airline. She has a background in journalism, and she's now gracing our podcast with her story in aviation. As we mentioned at the beginning of the show, she started out going to the airport with her family for some plane spotting, some nice, good, wholesome family entertainment, I say. And that journey didn't kick off immediately into a career in aviation. She actually took some twists and turns, but she wasn't satisfied with the direction she was going in, and she ended up attending some flight training schools. And next thing you know, she's an airline pilot. From humble beginnings as a CFI to the Sandpiper Regional Airline that we have a common thread between. Talk about 6 degrees of separation, right? And now a freshly minted captain on the A320 out of Miami International Airport for Legacy Airlines. Please help me in welcoming to the show Captain Adilia Roberts. Adilia, how you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
Hey, forget about it.
Tony, thank you for having me here. For the guests also listening, thank you. And thanks to Rob and Roger. I wouldn't say that I'm gracing the presence here. I'm honored to be here. And I hope that my story will inspire some others as well. I wouldn't ever feel like I've overcome any issues or any stereotypes because I never felt like that's what I was doing. I always felt like I was just living life. I was just going day in, day out, trying to become better for myself and for my family so that I can leave a legacy for those that come behind me, knowing that we were pretty limited as I was growing up.
So your beginnings, you were telling us in the pre-show some amazing stories, and all of us were kind of like eyes open, jaws dropped. You don't come from an aviation background.
No, I don't. I'm the first pilot any aviation in my family. I had a cousin when I was growing up who wanted to dabble with the idea. And he went to George T. Baker. It's a school in Miami across the street from Miami International. And he took a course there, becoming a mechanic. And maybe at some point, I remember asking him, what's that like? Is there females? Is there some sort of help to go to those types of schools? And he's like, no, this isn't a girls' school. This is for boys. And if you really want me to tell you, I think this is for boys that don't behave good. And I was like, what? But I think he was just trying to dissuade me because in the world and the family that we had was not, being a mechanic was not exactly something a female would do. So just to give you a little background, my parents are immigrants from Nicaragua. And they immigrated through the Rio Grande in the late 1986. And my mom came with my sister. And a couple months later, I came with my father. I vividly remember crossing the Rio Grande on my father's shoulders. I didn't know that's what was occurring. And it wasn't until many years later that I was able to piece a lot of the stories together because my parents didn't want to discuss it. On the weekends, we would go to Miami International Airport and watch some of the airplanes take off and land. My dad would like to think he was teaching us about world history and just geography. We'd talk about the flags on the airplanes. He'd encourage, questions like, oh, who do you think is flying on this airplane? We'd see the Spain flag and it's the Iberia flying. And oh, well, who could be going to Spain? And he'd always like answers like, oh, it's a doctor, it's a lawyer, it's some business executive. And then he'd finish like, oh, yes, those are great answers. Maybe you would consider being, a doctor or a lawyer or a business executive when you're older. And I would just kind of like, oh, I don't know, Dad. And then I'd just look around and I'd be like, I don't want to break your heart, Dad. And I know that you've sacrificed a lot for me to be here and my sisters. but I'll never be a doctor. I'm not into the whole cooties, just kind of germs and blood everywhere. Funnily enough, I've had to learn how to like that stuff being a mom of kids. Then he'd be like, well, maybe the lawyer position would be something you'd be interested in. And I'm like, yeah, that's not going to work either. I'm not very confrontational. I'd be losing all my cases. I don't know who'd make me a partner. And then he's like, oh, well, you're kind of, limiting what we're going to be doing. And I'm like, well, Dad, more importantly, why don't you tell me who flies those airplanes? How do those big machines get up in the sky? What are those lights doing on the side of those paved areas at the airport? The runway lights and what a runway is. And he would just be like, okay, yeah, it's time to go, because he didn't know anything about that. So I knew that I wanted to go to college, and I knew that I wanted to know more about what was occurring at this airport. You see cars all over, a lot of people coming and going. So I was curious from then about airplanes and everything that had to do aviation. In high school, because we didn't have a lot of funds, I knew that I had to work my behind off, get good grades so that I can get scholarships, so that I can have a career and change a lot of the things that I didn't think we were capable and able to do. I'd see my mom and my dad both working 2 jobs at a time. Sometimes I'd never see them together because they were at opposite jobs. So it was very hard growing up and seeing that we didn't have a lot of the opportunities some of my classmates had. So in high school, I had a 4.3 GPA, and I was pretty much set to get scholarships, Florida Bright Futures and a couple other ones now, Hispanic Heritage Awards as well. And I asked my high school counselor for some guidance, hey, I'd like to take a career in some sort of aviation, some kind of travel industry or something, and she's like, well, what are you talking about? And I'm like, well, I have good grades and I'm going to get scholarships. Can you tell me, what do I need to pursue? What do I put on here? Which schools should I be looking at other than the basic state colleges and state universities? And she said, yeah, I don't think that's going to work for you. You are a female. You're Hispanic. You wear glasses. You're an illegal immigrant. And should I keep going with this list? And I was like, what do you mean that I can't do what I came here to do? This is America, where dreams come true. And she was like, no, that's not how that works. And I'm like, okay, well, this is the year 2000. This isn't 1960 something. This is 2000. God. How is this possible? And so, listening to her, she's a guidance counselor, right? She's gone to college. She has a lot more exposure than I do. I've never even left the city of Hialeah. And she was like, well, you can be a waitress. Waitresses make good money on some of these restaurants, make pretty decent on certain nights. Or you can be a teacher, and no pun intended to the teachers or anything like that. I love them. They're great. I just didn't have that teaching heart to do it day in and day out.
Yeah.
Then finally she's like, well, you can just do something in journalism. Journalism might suit you. And I kind of listened to her at that point. I was like, oh, maybe she's right. She's more educated than I am. She probably is telling me this for a reason. And so I did. I graduated high school. I went to school and got my journalism degree. I worked at a local news station. I helped produce some videos, and I was constantly looking, though, for maybe like a mentor, someone to show me the ropes. How do I, move on through life and become someone successful so that I can help my parents, so that they don't have to work 2 jobs day in, day out, so that my sisters who were younger than me would follow in good steps and know that we are in the United States of America. We are here to do something good with ourselves, and we didn't leave our country for nothing. And so I asked this news anchor one day, hey, can we chat? I'd like to pick your brain about, how your career was. How do I get to be a young news anchor like yourself? I admire where you're at. And in a nutshell, just to kind of like point it down, she pretty much told me I had to use my God-given gift, showing what was in my lower half, and saying, you're going to use a lot of that to move ahead. And I was like, excuse me? She said, yes. Your face up is very important, because if you're going to be on cameras, that's huge. But a lot of people make a lot of money behind cameras too. And so the face doesn't even matter at that point. And I was like, what? She's like, yeah, you're going to go to a lot of parties. You're going to meet a lot of rich people. And if you just learn how to keep secrets and bend over backwards for them, no pun intended there, then you will see how quickly you move up and how successful you can be.
Oh my God. And this is not like a million years ago. This is within the last decade or two.
Yes, exactly. I was so angry with her telling me that for the longest, but I've made peace with it. And I realized that she did me a huge favor, and I'm grateful. Thank you if you're out there listening for telling me the truth about what was occurring behind that industry, and letting me know that if that wasn't something, which it wasn't going to be something I could do, then I needed to move on elsewhere and find a different career or find something else that was meant for me. And I left from there feeling completely unfulfilled, feeling so unhappy and so miserable because, I had seen how much work had gone into my parents, being able to just provide a small home for us, just being able to make ends meet for us. And my going to school so hard and studying. And I was just like, wow. So all of that doesn't even amount to anything because you're going to use, the oldest profession to get ahead. And I just could not wrap my mind around that. So I kept driving, and then I had a moment of epiphany. I was driving to Broward County, which is where I lived. And as I was passing Fort Lauderdale Airport, there was a 757 Legacy airplane landing. And this moment of epiphany for me, every time I tell the story, the hairs on my arms stand and the ones in the back of my neck, because that moment changed my life. I'd like to attribute to my career to that and the next things that occur. And you guys can judge for yourself and see if you agree with me. As I'm driving on 95 through Broward County by Fort Lauderdale Airport, as you know, there's about 4 or 5 lanes, 3 continue north on 95 and 2 curve towards 595 eastbound. It is always full with cars. At that particular moment, when I was driving, watching this Legacy airplane coming in to land, the 75, everything stopped. I looked in front of me. There wasn't a single car in sight on any of those 5 lanes for about 7 to 10 miles. I looked in the rearview mirror. There wasn't a single car behind me either. And I'm like, oh, it's just me and this airplane. And so I'm watching this airplane go left to right. And as it lands, touches down, you see a little bit of smoke come out. And I just knew, I'm like, this is what I need to pursue. I need to learn how to fly that airplane. There's just nothing else I'm never going to fill. Like, this is my fill my void. I'm going to keep driving. And I did. I kept driving all the way to Daytona, where I found the admissions office and an admissions officer who was available on that day. And he sat down with me, ran over a couple of numbers, a couple ideas. And he pretty much told me the exact same thing my high school counselor told me, that I was dreaming, that if I wanted to be an airline pilot, I needed to be either the daughter of an airline pilot, someone who was already in the industry, the daughter of a doctor or lawyer who could pay for my aviation career and degree. He laughed at the fact that I said I had a journalism degree instead of a science degree. And basically he was just like, this is not going to really happen for you. And so as I was walking out, there was a guy standing there, and this was the year 2004. I just want to kind of put it in perspective. There was a lot of people that were furloughed. 9/11 had happened. There was a lot of people on the streets, and I can see where he was coming from, why he was telling me those things. And also, at that point, who's going to pay for the 6-figure training at Embry-Riddle? So he was hesitant. As I'm walking out, though, there was a guy standing there, and I remember him clear as day. I never got his name or his number. And the reason I didn't do any of that was because he says to me, oh, hey, let's go have some coffee. And I'm, 19, 20 years old. And I'm thinking, this guy's just trying to flirt with me. He just wants to go have some coffee and talk about who knows what. I don't have time for this. I'm so sad. I can't believe this advisor just pretty much told me I can't continue my aviation dream just the exact same way my previous high school counselor had said.
Wow.
But this guy was like, he could read my emotions, and he's like, I'm not trying to flirt with you. Let's just sit right here on the curb. I want to talk to you about what I just overheard. And I was like, okay, go ahead, speak. I'm really rude, right? I should have been more grateful. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. That was not the kind of person I am. But I just didn't know what he
You're
wanted.
upset, yeah.
I was so angry. I'm like, and then he says to me, I'm sorry for eavesdropping on the conversation. My student called off sick today, and I had this yearning to come to the admissions office and grab a cup of coffee. And I heard what that counselor was telling you, that admissions officer. And while he is correct on a lot of aspects, you might never be an airline pilot because you have a lot of things going against you. You could still be a pilot if that's what you wanted to do. You can be fly crop dusting planes. You can tow banners in South Florida. There's lots of jobs like that. You can be a flight instructor. We really need a lot of those. And you can still call yourself a pilot. So if what you're trying to do is learn how to fly airplanes, you don't necessarily have to come here to Embry-Riddle. But you can go to a lot of local FBOs, get different plans, find one that fits your budget, one that fits your style of learning. Compare, the different Part 91 schools and see which one works for you. And now my eyes were huge again. And I was just like, oh my gosh, tell me more. Like, yeah, I can totally go get that cup of coffee now. And he was like, I'm kind of sorry. I have to go, though. I have another student showing up in the next 15 minutes. And so I'll just give you a couple different names. I don't want you to think I'm pushing one particular school over another. I am a flight instructor here, and he showed me his badge for Embry-Riddle. And he's like, I want to wish you the best of luck. He gave me 5 different names. I went to the 5 local schools, got different plans on what it was going to take me to go from 0 hours to my ATP.
Yeah.
And I'm just so eternally grateful because he just solidified and he changed the path for me, my family, and everyone that comes next. That's how I ended up at my training at my flight school.
Wow. And just
amazing.
God bless him. I mean, that is the kind of flight instructor, the kind of person that we need out here in this industry, are champions to
absolutely
fight against the biases and the diversity that have so long from the beginning of this industry. I mean, women have been in aviation since the 1930s and before.
Right.
They've been an integral part of all of it. And we're going to be talking a little bit about some statistics a little bit later, but it hasn't changed in over 20 years. That you would think that we would have this exponentially growing number of women in aviation make it to the highest peak of the career, and yet we still find challenges like these and all these obstacles, and it's disheartening. I mean, I'm a father. I have a teenage daughter. As of yet, she's not interested in aviation, but the idea of someone telling her that she can't do it actually upsets me greatly. And thank you for sharing that with us. I don't know, my eyes were big, my jaw was dropped. I'm just sitting here not believing it. I find it so hard to believe. I've always been such an advocate for this industry. I've heard the same things like you're mentioning, but I think it doesn't have an impact as greatly as it had with you. I too, immigrant to this country. I too had family and people telling me I can't do it, too expensive. My mom wanted me to be an architect or a lawyer because, feet on the ground, make big money, that kind of thing. None of that interested me. And inevitably, as fate would have it, I ended up here. And so I have a connection with your story. It hits me close to the heart because I feel like I had the same hurdles, but then I stop and I recount what you're saying about use your God-given talent with the news anchor that was giving you advice that I find just absolutely disgusting. And then, hearing these roadblocks to your journey come up, and thank God for that instructor who just took a moment to intervene and completely changed your direction.
Yes, absolutely. And, and like I said, I picture him clear as day. I just try to focus, and I wish I had one of those photographic memories and try to focus on that one badge he flashed at me so I can find out who he was. Yeah. And I can tell him, listen, you've changed my life. Thank you so much. But I think, like you said, I wish there was more of us out there doing those types of things, helping encourage people that are not in the industry, because it's not a competition with one another. And sometimes I feel that that's what it comes down to. And I know it's all seniority based in our industry, but sometimes even when you're not in the industry and you do something and you teach someone about it, you can change their path or the way the perspective they're seeing a certain job, because they don't understand it. When I did go to a local school up in mid Florida for training, I remember asking my parents, I'm going to be signing on this dotted line for this course. They're asking me for a cosigner because I have credit, but not enough credit. And when I sat my parents down and I told them this, again, them not knowing what the industry was like or anything about it, the only big things they knew were what had occurred on 9/11. My dad was just an avid no. He's like, I love you and you've had great ideas. You told me at one point you might be a judge because you're trying to find yourself. I just don't know that this career is going to do anything for you. I don't think I'm going to be able to sign this for you. And so I spoke to my mom as well. And my mom was just like, well, I have to do whatever your dad says. Being traditional Hispanics, the woman kind of does what the man says. And so I remember leaving from there and calling that advisor at that school and saying, listen, I'm having difficulties finding a cosigner. I'm going to get my real estate license so that I'm going to sell homes and be able to pay for these loans as I continue. And he was like, oh, that's great. But you might still need this cosigner because you haven't been doing real estate long enough. And so I did real estate. I got my license, sold a couple of homes, and we'll circle back around to some of the stories there. But about 2 months later, I remember calling my mom and saying, Mom, I'm feeling a little behind on the course. I want to start and I want to do this course full time, but doing real estate and then flying and learning, I'm holding myself back. I really need you to back me up on this. And she co-signed for me. And I'll tell you this because I didn't find this out until about 9 years later, when I sent the final payment on my student loan. And I called my mom and I was like, Mom, I'm making my final payment on that student loan you co-signed for me. And I can just hear the sigh of the relief in her. She was like, oh, thank God. And I was like, excuse me? And she was like, I didn't tell your dad I co-signed for you. And when I originally told him I was thinking about it, he said he was going to divorce me. And so I'm just grateful that you're done paying. And I'm like, what? All these years you've been carrying that along? And she's like, yes. And I just kept holding my breath, if you were going to have a job or not, because we don't know anything about it. And now when we go back and we look at things and we're sitting around drinking coffee or whatever. And I'm like, do you guys remember this and that? And they're like, oh, that was just never, I'm sorry. We just didn't know. Yeah. And so we try to encourage and teach others about this.
But does your dad know now, I assume?
He does. And, he is my biggest fan now.
Well, that was my question.
Trips. Yes, I'll do certain trips. And then he'll tell me, oh, so I was Googling on here about, the Capitol there and this occurred in 1930s and talk to the locals there about Sir blah, 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 and this and that. And, and I'll go to some places and I'll start talking to some of the locals, maybe in Lima, and asking them, oh, do you remember when this happened and that happened? And they're looking at me like, how do you know? I'm like, oh, I have neighbors and friends from this area. And it's my dad that he's been Googling this stuff. And I'll take pictures of certain places that he's looked at. And my mom's like, we're proud of you. But that's as far as it goes. And I think it's because they're still scared of, what may happen and not knowing. who's going to come next and say, oh, we're related. You guys send us some money or whatever the case may be. They're just constantly that's all they'll say. Like, we're just proud, and they don't talk more about it.
It's a different generation, I think, and so they're
cultural
always,
too. I think is some of the
for sure.
Because I come from Hispanic background, and I'd say they're all like that, but some of the family members are a little taboo kind of thing.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
And we'll hear more about Captain Adilia's fantastic journey right after the break. And ladies and gentlemen, we're back. Now we've been hearing about this journey in aviation with obstacles there to slow down the progress of those that dream and aspire to be in this fantastic career. Yes, I said fantastic. I love that word. Fantastic career. And I'm so impressed with the tenacity and the drive that Captain Adilia has been sharing with us. Now, you had this journey. You've got the support of your family. You went through your flight training. Now, where did you end up doing all your flight training?
I did my flight training at a school in DeLand, Florida. I don't think it exists anymore. It's called Regional Airline Academy at the time.
RAA.
I remember.
RAA, yep. Yeah. And being in the industry now, I've reached and I've talked to a lot more people that went through the school also. And the reason I say I don't think it's serious because I saw it on the news a couple of years after I graduated and left from there. It was one of the schools that had closed up the doors and locked the doors and left students outside wondering what had happened. Yeah. During my time there, I had loved the school. I thought the teachers were great. I had a lot of challenges there to overcome as well. But to me, it was just a great pathway. I went through all of my training there up to my CFII, my MEI, and then I started flight instructing there. They had a bridge program with some of the commuter regional airlines. And one of the regionals came to interview one day, and my chief pilot asked me if I would be willing to interview. And still thinking back about my counselor and that other advisor telling me that, I was never going to be an airline pilot. I never threw my name in the hat for these commuters or any of the interviews. I was just fat, dumb, and happy being a flight instructor. I was a pilot. I mean, what else could I ask for? I could pay my bills. I was just ecstatic doing what I loved. But this chief pilot told me, listen, I think you'd be great. Give me your resume, come dressed in your suit, and be prepared for an interview. So I was like, well, I think there's other pilots that are more qualified for the position. Why don't you have them interview? And he was like, because I'm asking you. And I was like, yes, sir. And I showed up. I did the interview. And at the end of the interview, the commuter HR rep, she stops me and she says, I have never had an interview go quite like that. And I was like, well, it's because I'm a talker, right? And she was like, well, yes, but I can see where your journalism career comes in. Most of the guys that we have interviewed, it's very technical. And I was like, oh, okay. So she's like, because I can't give you the conditional job offer like I did for the other guys, I'm not completely sold. I'm going to bring you to Texas. And I want you to get into a simulator with Chuck Airman and fly with him. And then he'll give us the final yes or no. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. I've never even been on an airplane, like a real airplane going up to Texas. So that'd be super exciting for me. And she was like, what?
No, wait a minute. Hold on. Hit the brakes. Pump the brakes. You were a flight instructor in Florida with plenty of students getting your flight time with your logbook, but you had never been in an airline?
No.
In the back of an airplane?
Yeah. No. Where was I going to go?
Oh, man.
Who was I going to see? I was like, I just...
But so the first time you were on the back of a commercial airline was at Legacy Airlines.
On your way for your job interview.
That's right. On my way to my job interview.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that amazing?
Exciting. Yeah. And so I got there and everything went, peachy. I got the job. And then when I came back to the academy, they were like, you should not go to this commuter Sandpiper airline because the flow there is just taking forever. The upgrade time, they're looking at 20 years, find somewhere else to go. But because of my background, I was just like, I don't have much experience. I don't have friends that are in this industry. I don't know anything else. And I think flying with these guys that have been in this seat for 20 years is going to teach me a lot. Yeah. I think I'm going to be able to learn so much more from them than from the ones that are quick turnarounds. And, in my mind, I still always felt like, oh, I'm Hispanic, I'm a female, I'm not supposed to be here. I'm supposed to be doing, something else. And I'm already grateful and blessed to be where I'm at. So I went to that Sandpiper airline and I loved it. I learned a lot. Again, I had other challenges to overcome there. Some of those guys were very unhappy, me with none of this experience, being their co-pilot. But nonetheless, we persevered. We kept going. Then a couple years after that, I got pregnant, and they opened a new base in my hometown of, South Florida. And I got offered a position of a lifetime, is what I call. Originally, I was asked to sit special assignment, which is like playing secretary, to the chief pilot's office while they were conducting their interviews for a chief pilot, an assistant chief pilot. They were opening a second certificate. They had a certificate for the ATRs airplanes, but now they wanted something for the jets. Mm-hmm. And since I had started as a jet, we'll call a jet baby, I started immediately on the Embraer and the CRJs in Chicago. When they opened down there, I had experience that came with that particular airplane. So they asked me to sit there. I answered a couple of phone calls. I sat for about 2 weeks while they were finding the correct candidate. But all the candidates that were interviewing for that job didn't speak Spanish. They all spoke English. And granted, in our career, when you're flying, English is the spoken language. But when you're working at the Miami International Airport, there's a lot of people that don't speak a word of English. Yeah. And so one of the chief pilots from the other certificate asked me to throw my name in the hat for assistant chief pilot. And I was just like, no, I don't have experience for this. I'm not even a captain here. And he was like, well, that's exactly why they're going to take you, because they're hiring first officers to become chief pilots, assistant chief pilots, to get the experience and not remove our captains from the line. And you're not going to be by yourself. You're just an assistant. And so it kind of took them pulling my hairs a little bit and kind of twisting my arms. And then they used you just had a baby and you'll be home every single night with your baby. Mm-hmm. And I was sold. Yeah. And I sat chief pilot for a couple of years there, assistant and then chief. Was it like 4 years?
I think that's where I recognized you from. You were doing that in 2011?
Yes.
Okay, I was the assistant chief in LA in 2011.
There you go. See? Yeah. Back to the 6 degrees.
So, yep. 6 degrees of separation.
Yeah. Cool. And that was a steep learning curve. How about that? Yeah. Wow. The stuff I learned in there.
Yeah. Well, I was always impressed with what you would hear. I mean, here you are, you're, a relatively senior FO as an assistant chief. You get to be, like you said, you get to go home every night. You come in to work in business casual. You answer phone calls. You track the lates. You track the issues that are happening. And you'd have captains calling in like frantic over something that is like, okay, so just do this and don't be so dramatic. Right. I was so impressed by that. That position for me didn't last long because the bankruptcy happened, and of course they got rid of all the assistants, and yeah. So, and how did that transition for you? Did that similar situation play out for you?
When they started announcing all that, I stayed in the office, and then they said they were going to close some of the bases. Mm-hmm. But at that point, I had already been thinking about going back to the line and flying full time because I missed it. Being in the office, I didn't feel that I got to fly as much, and I wanted to stay current, and I wanted to be the sharpest pilot I could be, because that's where my calling was. I just feel so happy when I'm doing it. But I had gone to a couple of conferences, Women in Aviation, OBAP, and I was trying to get my name out there. I had been volunteering at the Make-A-Wish flights in Miami, and I had ran into some big wigs, like we like to call them, and gotten my name and my resume out there. So when the Legacy Airlines started hiring in 2014, 2013, my name was out there, and then I didn't want to leave the company, the Sandpiper, without an assistant or without someone to fill my shoes. But then they announced, "Oh, we're getting rid of all those positions anyway." And I was like, "Perfect." Because I'm going to be leaving soon. I got hired off the street at this other company, and I'm going to be leaving. So for me, it actually worked out great. Now, had I really planned it in that manner, where the company wouldn't have worked out in that manner. But for me, that's just the way it was transgressing. Worked out really good. Yeah.
Yeah. What a fantastic opportunity to transition to mainline.
Yeah.
Anyone that can do that, always reach out and try to make that happen, because we are a seniority-based industry, and your seniority number could be, maybe 2 or 3 numbers under a classmate, and their entire journey takes them to these fantastic opportunities that go a certain direction. And then because you were just a couple seniority numbers under them, you maybe didn't get that aircraft, or you didn't get that base, or you had to commute for a couple more years, or you were on reserve a couple more years. So yeah, I too tried to get in through the front door. And I had some champion captains out there really going to bat for me as well. But life happened the way it did, and I ended up coming through with what we call is the flow through. I don't know if everyone out there listening knows what that is, but certain regional airlines out there have agreements, and primarily the wholly owned regional airlines have agreements with their mainline partners. And some of them, it's a guaranteed interview. Some of them, it is just a straight flow through. And others are just preferential hiring. So when you're out there making a decision on what regional airline you might want to apply to, we've on the past few shows, we've been talking a lot about this. We have a repeat guest host and listener and longtime listener, Alex, who's a new hire right now at Sandpiper. He just texted me the other day. I'm sure we'll be hearing more from Alex. He has a class date at Sandpiper.
Yeah.
So yes.
Congrats, Alex.
Yeah, May 16th is his first day of I guess, INDOC. And we'll hear more about his journey coming up. So yeah, congratulations, Alex, for sure. So yeah, so there are different pathways anyone could take to get to an airline. And man, the fact that you got in through the front door, that's fantastic news, and congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, it wasn't easy, like I said. So I got my name out there. I did a lot of networking, and I always heard, network this, network that, blah, blah, blah. But I never really felt like I applied it as much. And then once I was in the office, I could see when there was other events, and I used it to my advantage to get myself out there. But not necessarily just because I wanted to move forward. It was because I can see when I was participating at the Make-A-Wish flights that there was a lot of people, a lot of our passengers, completely in shock about female pilots, especially a Hispanic one. I'd sit there and I'd be like, "Hola, ¿cómo está? Bienvenidos." And they're like, "What? What's happening here?" Like,
esta muchacha, that's que mujer.
And that's why I was like, I have to get out there a little bit more. I have to show other people that, they can do this also. It's, it's not brain surgery. At least I don't feel like it is. And if you work hard at it, you can do it also. And so to me, that was an advantage. Yeah. I did come to the interview and I was one of 19 people standing in a semi-circle. And I had one of the recruiters at the Legacy this close to my face. Like I'm like, he's either going to make out with me or he wants me to know he had something with onions for lunch. That's how close he was to me. And he says, "I bet you think you're special that you're here amongst this group." Yes. And this was just recently, like 5 years ago, and I'm like, wow, we're still doing this. And he's like, "What?" And I was like, so then I looked around, and everyone, with the exception of 3 guys that were at that interview, was military. And thank you to everyone that is military and that has put in the service for us for the freedoms that we get to enjoy. But while we're standing there, he says, what makes you special? Why are you here? And so I'm looking around and I said, I'm special because I'm probably one, if not maybe two, that can pull up a release using a FOSS code. And he was like, huh? And I'm like, a FOSS code, a release? And he was like, so then everybody's like, what's a release? Because they're all military. They don't have releases in the traditional manner that regional airlines or that Legacy uses.
So a new hire in your class got in your face trying to make this a whole gender thing, and you put him in his place. Thank you for that.
I was just like, what?
Yeah.
Like, we're all here together. Again, we are not, it's not competition. I get it. We're all trying to get the job, but really?
Yeah. Rob, I know you got to go. You want to just interject and say your goodbyes?
Yeah. Hey, listen, I am very inspired by your story. It's very amazing. You are a huge advocate for females and Hispanic women, and anybody who's in that kind of position ought to be looking up to you and following in your footsteps. Unfortunately, I gotta cut out early. I can't wait to listen to the podcast and listen to the rest of your story. And hopefully one day we get to fly together, because that'll be cool.
I'm looking forward to that. Thanks so much, Rob.
All right. Take care.
Thanks,
see you,
Rob.
Roger. See you, Tony.
See ya. And ladies and gentlemen, we've been hearing this story about the journey of Captain Adilia's path in aviation. And even here at a mainline carrier, within the last few years, there are those bold enough, brazen enough to get in your face and tell you you're not special. The audacity. For me, that's borderline harassment. And we have to understand that this industry is plagued by a chauvinist mindset. And I know you've mentioned a couple things like military pilots that come in because they had their experience, and we thank them for their service to our country. Absolutely. And I can tell you that it's not the rule. It is the individual that feels like the boys club needs to stay intact. It kind of turns my stomach a little bit to hear that this has happened to you, but it's not happening to you. You don't allow it to, and that's what's inspiring.
Yeah, I just shrug it off, and I use it more as how can I educate this person? How do I show them this different perspective? How do I get them to see it from my angle? Because sometimes people just don't notice that they're doing that, or they're saying it and maybe it's just not intended. Of course, there's a couple that do it intentional, but when you don't give them that pride in knowing that you've been bothered by it, then they kind of let it go. And like you said, it's not the title, it's not the background, it's just the individual persons themselves. Yeah.
Now we kind of were discussing a little bit about this in the pre-show when we were kind of all getting to know each other. And I had a little bit of homework that I was doing last night, and I was looking at a Seattle Business article. I'll put a link in the show notes, that though women in the U.S. make up 40% of the total workforce, women represent less than 5% of the total number of professional pilots. Many female-centric programs and organizations have offered their opinions on why this staggering statistic has not changed much over the past few decades, despite a push from STEM programs and early start aviation programs in our school systems. As a woman who has pushed through the gender biases and microaggressions that plague the aviation industry, what advice would you offer a young lady who is interested in this career path?
That's a tough one. There's a lot of obstacles that we have to overcome as women, as aviators. And every time I hear those statistics, I always fall back on the reason I think that happens is because as women, we tend to be the child bearers. And sometimes we're willing to put our own personal growth on the back burner when it comes to family. Because when you start looking at some of those statistics in the college levels, it's almost to like 21% that are getting their initial student pilot certificates. And then once it hits the regional airlines, it drops down to about 12%, which is, in the child rearing years. And then it drops down to that 6%, 5% at the major airlines. One of the biggest things for me has been finding my tribe and loving them hard. And by that, I mean finding my support system. My parents, my sisters, sometimes they weren't very understanding of it, but we go through like different cycles. My spouse, him understanding my career, knowing that this is where I'm happy, and him supporting me is huge. Sometimes, my parents had to work. I'd have to call an auntie or someone. Hey, I need you to help me with my babies, or, knowing that the path is not always going to be straightforward. Sometimes you're going to be on an off road, but you always come right back to the path, and you follow. You've got to stay focused on what it is you're trying to do and what the reason for it is. Because I've flown with a lot of other pilots, females as well, and they've left their career to go raise their children, and now 20 years later that their children are grown, they're coming back into the industry. Some of them say they wish they had a support system. Some of them say that they're regretful that they stopped their career, and others say they're not regretful at all, because they spent all those years with their kids, and now that their kids are grown, they can come back and pursue something that they wanted. And so what worked for me does not necessarily mean it's going to work for you, but don't think that your path is in any way wrong or not the correct way either. We just have to find, how to juggle what we're trying to do, what our path is going to be. I had friends that always said, you have to move to your base, to wherever you're going to be at. But for me, moving to my base was not my priority. My priority was I commute because my family is here. This is where I'm grounded. This is where my spouse and my kids are going to be comfortable because this is their home. So since this is the career that I want to do, I'm the one that's going to commute. I'm the one that's going to go through the extra hoops to get myself there, versus having them all up and lift somewhere else where they're not comfortable and they're not happy because they don't get to see their grandmas or aunties. So that's one of the things that I also thought about when it came time to commuting for these regionals or for the legacy airlines.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think culturally, you kind of touched on it, the Latin culture for women, they're taught at a very young age, at least traditionally, that their role is to maintain the home, to support the family. This kind of idea that the man is the one who provides financially, safety, security, and the woman, should go with whatever, like even with your own experience with your mother, who was like, well, I have to do whatever my husband does. Your father says, I can't go beyond. And then the fact that she went behind his back and kept that secret for all those years is a testament to her love and her confidence in you. And that's not unheard of. That's also very traditional Hispanic cultural to do that for your children. You sacrifice everything for your children. But what ends up happening a lot of times, I think, and this was a conversation I had, an unrelated conversation I had recently on the flight deck with a captain who had inspired me with his stories and regaling his experience in the past, is that often leaves a void in identity for women, Hispanic women, and just women in a career industry, because they then associate their identity with taking care of the family, and that becomes a stigma that when you break away from that traditional role to go and find a career for yourself to gain your own identity, to find your passion and find something that you actually love to do and go against all of the backlash that comes with that and then be successful at it. It's almost like an in-your-face reaction. The fact that you have become successful in your career, considering your heritage, your culture, the fact that you've done it without having to use your God-given talent, but more your inspiration with your education, with your mind, with your soul, and say, this is what I'm meant to do. This is how I'm going to do it. And all of those barriers and microaggressions that I'm bombarded with are not going to hold me back.
Yes.
You know, Rob said it. It's very inspiring. And I think that it's very important to have your story told on every possible platform out there. Because if it inspires just one little girl who's plane spotting at the airport with their family, to say, no, that is not okay. I want to do this and I'm going to do it and nothing's going to stop me. It'll all be, it's all so worth it. So I want to say thank you for sharing that. Now, you've mentioned Women in Aviation, OBAP, and these are some fantastic organizations. And now what these organizations do is provide mentorship programs for young aviators and people that want to get into aviation. Have those programs been crucial to your journey and your success, or do you think they've more helped guide you in the direction that you've chosen?
I want to say they've helped guide me. I didn't realize how important it was to attend some of these networking events, but it was more because I still didn't feel that there was enough representation from my background in a lot of these networking events. When I went to the first one, the Women in Aviation's International, I remember waking up at 3 a.m. because another male pilot had told me, if you want to get one of those fast pass tickets for the interviews to one of the legacy companies, you have to be there at like 3 a.m. And I was like, what? The thing doesn't even start till like 9 o'clock. What do you mean? And he was like, trust me, if that's what you're planning to do, make sure you're there early. And I showed up and I remember the lines wrapped around the lobby and to the front. And the majority was males. And I'm like, wait, is this the women's conference or is this a different conference? Am I at the wrong place? And so then they were like, no, this is the women's conference. This is part of the network. You're in the right spot. And so I was like, wow. But I stood in line along with them. I learned some of the background. Some of these pilots they were 777 captains overseas, in the same line that I was in, being, a co-pilot from Sandpiper, trying to get into the same job. And so just the stories and hearing, everything that had occurred to them, so that we would end up in the same line for the same job was kind of an eye-opening time for me. But then I realized, if this is what's occurring at this particular organization, then that means we're not doing a good enough job introducing females into these careers. We're not exposing the stories that need to be told so that others know this is possible. And so then I decided, that stuff is really produced and sent and advertised amongst the aviation industry. That's why everyone is there as a pilot. And so I decided I wanted to do something more on a local basis. And I went back to my local college and my local high school. And I sat down and I said, I'd like to do like a job fair. You guys have these recruitment days. I remember when I was in high school, you'd have different people come and talk about their careers. I would like to speak about my career. And that's where I met my high school counselor again. And I told her, do you remember a conversation we had many years? And she was like, I talked to a lot of people. And I said to her, this and this is what you told me. And here's where I'm at now. And like her face just dropped. And I'm like, and I'm not telling you my story because I want to rub it in your face and I want to make you feel bad. I just want you to know that it was possible. And she apologized. She's like, I'm sorry. I just from my background and my history, I had never seen it happen. I'd never seen somebody break those barriers. And thank you for educating me on it. I'm actually retiring this year, but I will make sure that I pass the information on to other counselors that, we shouldn't just push people away from a path they want because we don't know about it, but rather encourage them to seek a different path or a different career that is going to help them. Maybe unite them to someone a little bit better that's in that path. And so then the next place I went at my local college, one of the questions that I got from the females there was what we were just talking about. They'd raise their hands and they'd say, I don't ever want to be a pilot. I don't want to be gone from my house for so long, weeks at a time. I want to be able to have family. I want to have kids. And, I had already had my second child at that time. And I was like, well, what makes you think that none of us here has kids? And Captain Linda Powell's was part of that conference. And then the lady was like, excuse me? And I was like, I'm a mother of two, and I know Linda has two children as well. And I'm sure some of these other female pilots can tell you that also. We have families. It's not the same cookie cutter family you think of where both parents go work and they come home and they're home every day. We learn to have our families in a different lifestyle. We still celebrate, whatever holidays. It might not be on the same day. We might do it the day before, the day after, but we still do those holidays. And you just learn how to make it work. And so she was like, wow, I never really thought about it in that manner. And 4 years later, I volunteered at that same job fair, same recruitment at that same college. Mm-hmm. And I was sitting in the far left of that table, and they had started with the other ones, but because I had been there before. So I was waiting my turn. And the second speaker, when she started talking, she was like, the reason I'm here on this table speaking to you as a student pilot, just rated as a commercial pilot, is because of the lady that's sitting at the end of this table. And I'm like, wait, that's me. And I'm looking around, and she comes around the table and she's like, I'm so-and-so. I was sitting right here at this chair, and I had told you that I had thought about it, but I was never going to be a pilot because I wanted to have kids. And you told me that we can have kids as pilots. And I just got in my commercial certificate, and I was like, oh my God, I'm so excited for you. And she's like, so yes, having these conferences and having these groups and network events does make a difference. Sometimes, I wish there was 30 of them that were sitting there that I had changed 30 people's lives, but it was just one. And even that one is just so gratifying to know that she was able to see that different perspective, and she was able to break the barriers from her family and be able to get into the industry. I later found out her dad is actually a mechanic for the legacy airline I work at. And I saw him once on the flight deck. He came up there and he was like, hey, I had to shake your hand because I've been following your career since you spoke to my daughter. I want you to know I admire and I'm so grateful. And I was like, that wasn't for me. Thank your daughter. She's doing this for you, and she wants you to be proud of her. I was just there on the right time, the right day. And I said the right thing that encouraged her, gave her the final push to say, you can do this on your own. Because I'm sure she's been watching your work ethic, and that's why you're here today. But thank you for taking the time to see me.
Oh my God. It's the beautiful ripples in the pond when
Absolutely.
we cast that first stone and watch them grow over a lifetime, and all the people that they touch is an amazing thing to experience. Congratulations.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. Now you've been in the industry a while. You've experienced many different chairs. You've worn many different hats. Are you active in the real estate business as well?
I am. Yes, I do real estate. I'm in the South Florida area. I do it because I feel good. It keeps me busy. You guys were mentioning earlier in the podcast about being reserved and being flown a lot. I'm on the other side. For some reason, I feel like I'm not flying enough. I just flew 16 hours for this last month. And I'm kind of like, hey, I'm over here. Call me. I want to work. I want to fly.
So that's actually very positive to have then on the background, that it keeps you busy. It's another source of income. We've been saying this now for a couple of years here on the show is, we find these aviators that put all their eggs in one basket, and it's like, well, I went to a flight school, I got a degree in avionics or aviation sciences, and here I am, and I did a couple of years here, and then a couple of years at a regional, and now a couple of years, and now I'm at mainline, and I'm going to retire, and I'm going to be number 3. And it's like, hey, that's fantastic, that's great. But what do you have as your backup, or what do you have on the side, or what do you do? And they're like, what? Huh? And so I'm thinking, in my mind, what if something were to happen? You lost your medical and you can't fly. I mean, yeah, there are plenty of other avenues. One could get creative. You can go work in the training department. You can go work in management, or you can become a mentor of sorts in some way, shape, or form, and help those if you can't fly yourself. But having something else not related to the industry, I think, is a very smart move. We all encourage that, especially as instructors and then later on as captains on the line, to encourage that to young aviators. Do you think that's made I mean, we know that it helped pave the way for you to get financing to get this career going, but do you think that keeping that up has benefited you more than the work it takes to keep it up?
It does. It does. I feel it helps me in a lot of different manners. Obviously, the paying, helping me pay for my degrees or my certificates and flight hours. But it also gives me something to fall back on. For example, right now during the pandemic, when they were starting to issue the letters, I thought, man, I might be one of those to receive this letter and be told I don't have a job. And I wasn't as worried as my fellow pilots were that had nothing to fall back on, because I was like, hey, well, it's okay. I'll be home and I'll just focus a little bit more on my real estate on my second career. Yeah. I'll just, go show more homes and know that I have something. I had also seen a really crazy statistic a couple of years back that said when a lot of our major airline carriers pilots retire, the death rates are pretty high. And I don't know if it's because they only identify themselves as just being a pilot, and then they can no longer be this mainline pilot, and now they feel depressed and whatever occurs from there, or if it has something else to do with the lifestyle itself, that we eat such rich food and have these adult beverages, and our lifestyle takes a toll. I don't know if it's that, but I feel like once I get to that age, I know I'll have something else to look forward to. Obviously my kids, and hopefully I'll have grandkids or whatever occurs then, my pets. But this second career that I do, it's just as gratifying as it is when I do these flights, because now I'm showing people homes and I'm making them experience and be able to achieve a once-in-a-lifetime dream. Not a lot of people actually buy multiple homes or buy one home and sell another home. A lot of the people that I tend to work with are first-time buyers, and I can just see the hope and the enthusiasm that they're going to look at this house, and I can just see them reliving this dream, this expectation. Oh, this is where it's going to be my master room. This is where I'm going to have my kids. This is the backyard where I'm going to put my kids' swing set, my grandkids sets. And I'm just like, watching them. And then, they're like, oh, well, I really can't afford a really big house. And I'm like, okay, well, then let's look at a smaller house and then you can build into it afterwards. Or, oh, well, I kind of visualized it a little bit different. And I'm like, okay, well, all it's going to take is, a sledgehammer, you knock this wall down a little bit, and then you can put a little bit of tile in a different manner, maybe a little wallpaper, and it'll give it a different look. And just kind of helping them in that way. I just feel good. It makes me feel warm and fuzzy to know that I'm helping them in a different manner. Not everybody's going to be into aviation, but a lot of people are going to be into homes, because everybody needs to have that shelter. And so to me, the real estate portion doesn't only just help me pay for some of my bills, but it does help my spiritual self feel fulfilled that I'm helping other people in that manner. And so I know that when it comes to my mental state of being, it helps me there as well. And like I said, some days I don't fly as much as I would like to fly, but I have a job with the real estate that I can leave the house and tell, my husband, hey, I'm not going to drive you crazy today because I'm going to go show a house.
Now, Roger has his real estate license, but his schedule is 24/7. His phone rings at all hours. He gets to hear his pilots call him with all kinds of personal issues, not aviation related. So Roger is pretty busy, but also has a real estate license. Maybe we can get some kind of aviation real estate collaboration.
There's actually aviation real estate. Yep.
Yeah, it's something. I mean, it's something that I could do. I mean, fortunately, a lot of real estate is paperwork. A lot of it's digital now with pushing paper to one entity or another.
Yeah.
I'm not as outgoing as you, so I'm more introverted, and so I never really. It was something that I did because I was interested in it. I think I probably did it 6 years ago or something now.
Yeah.
So.
They say 1 in 7 people that has a real estate license. So if you can count, 14 people, 2 of them are going to have their license.
Oh, really?
They just don't renew it after their initial, which I did.
Yeah. But you were talking about all the different renewals of your certificates of the different airplanes. And sometimes when it comes to real estate, you have to do that. You have to keep with your renewal.
Coming up next. I actually got to do that next year.
Yeah.
I have a lot of renewals.
And I think you guys have inspired me. I think it's time for me to start something new. I might get my real estate license too.
It's not that hard. I mean, you got to put some time and
as a
effort
pilot,
into it,
if you're going to be a legacy captain someday, making a lot of money, and you're going to want to purchase homes all around the country and places you visited so you can have your vacation homes, maybe you want to buy a yacht somewhere or, a jet of your own,
Wow.
You gotta have that knowledge so you can do it yourself.
Maybe I will go become a legacy airlines pilot then.
I'm telling you, Roger, you've got to come over.
I want to be one of those too if I'm going to be able to buy my own plane someday. Thanks.
There you go.
Yeah, we all aspire to be the guys that we fly in the back. I want to sit in the back of my plane, not in the front of it.
Yeah.
That's never happening, but.
Well, you know what they say. It takes money to make money.
Absolutely.
Well, it's also time for me to go.
Oh, yeah.
I know that I've been an integral part of this conversation. I think it was great having you on, Adilia.
Thank you so much,
Rob. Like Rob said, I think, if you can just inspire people, I mean, obviously people that were someone in your position there are obstacles to overcome, but to be able to hear that they can be overcome, I think is sometimes just what people need to push them over, to push them in that direction. Like it's not impossible. Unfortunately, there are people that are out there that tell people that.
Yeah.
But to be able to push through those barriers, because it can be done. I think that is one of the nice things about America is that, they can be overcome, but let's face it, we also still put a lot of barriers, on people too. But that they can be overcome, and to be able to hear your story was fantastic. Right, Tony?
That's right. Well, thanks, Roger. Thank you for joining us, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Take care, guys.
Bye. Thank you.
We'll see you sometime at a future date.
You got it.
Bye.
See ya. So when you were first starting out, you went through all your discovery of what is entailed in a career in aviation, as we all did. You learn as you go. What is it that, if you could go back in time and tell yourself an aspect that is a reality of what to expect, what would you go back and tell yourself?
I think I would tell myself not to be so shocked with the biases that are still in this industry. I think in my mind, when the high school counselor in the 2000s told me, you can't do that because this and that, I was just shocked, thinking, we're 40 years past so many things and we're still thinking about that. That doesn't make any sense. And as I continued in the industry, I realized that there were still a lot of biases like that we needed to overcome. I had a flight instructor. I remember, he made me cry. And it was because it was it was the time of the month, and it happens. We're women. We're going to go through a specific time of the month. And I wasn't feeling good. And I said to him, hey, I need to cut my training short. I'm not feeling so good. I need to go home. And he was like, no, you're not going to go home. You're going to finish the class. You don't get to just, call off and say you don't feel good and go home when you're at any major airline or any, other industry.
Yeah. You
have to suck it up and finish it. And I was just like, okay, I will do that. And then I kept, doing, I think we were doing chandelles or something on that particular day. And I was just not doing them to the specific point he wanted me to be at. Mm-hmm. And he was just like, get over it. I don't care if you're a woman or not. Because you're a woman, you have to do these better than everybody else. And I was like, because I'm a woman, I have to do this better than everybody else? I thought we were all being held to ATP standards. What are you talking about? And it was just, it felt very demeaning. Yeah. And I just felt like I was really uncomfortable. And I cried because my emotions were just so strong at that particular time. And I remember we landed, because now at that point, when he sees me crying, he realized, okay, I've closed off my training. I'm not going to learn anything else. Mm-hmm. We parked and I ran out from the flight training office. I didn't know other people had seen me. And the next day, the chief pilot had asked me, he's like, hey, can I speak to you? Do you need a new instructor? Did he do something to you? I'm like, no, I did not handle myself properly in the way that I would have liked. I did not feel so good. And I just continued with the class and I didn't perform to my best. And I was still making excuses for him in the manner that I was like, I should have done better. I should have been more prepared. If I didn't feel good to start, I shouldn't have started that class. I shouldn't have, shown up and done it in that manner. Yeah. And then at Sandpiper, I was on an oral and they were asking me questions. For a particular time, they practically almost asked us to build the airplane from scratch.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't happen like that anymore. But on that particular day, they were asking me to build it from scratch. And I had already done that. It had been about an hour into the oral. And this Chuck Airman, I see him kind of like shaking his head. And he was just like, oh, I haven't asked you about the APU, which was one of the starting systems we had originally talked about. And I was like, yes, sir, you did ask me. We talked about it. And then you commented this and blah, blah, blah. And he was just like, and he was like, okay, well, let's talk about the electrical system. I'm like, we've already covered all of that. And then at that point, you can hear somebody knocking on the doors that said, hey, you've been in there long enough. It sounds like she's prepared. You either sign her or you don't. But I'm out here waiting for my quiz too. And so I was just kind of looking at him like, and then he was like, yeah, I guess you're ready. And he signs me off and next. Oh. And I was just like, what? And so again, with the biases, so I asked him, I said, why did you feel like you needed to go back in a circle and ask me the same systems again? Were my answers not correct to start with? Or is there something I should prepare more? If I'm not ready, I don't want to be signed off. And he was just like, no, it's just when women explain certain systems, they explain it in a different manner than the guys do. And so I just feel like I needed to question you in a different manner. And like, for example, is this green or is this teal? Well, it looks like a green to me, but, teal is a shade of green, if that's what you're asking. And well, do you think maybe it's more of emerald green versus a green? I'll be like, well, it's green regardless, emerald green or not. And so I felt like the questions were kind of...
He was fishing.
Yes. And again, stuff that happened at that particular commuter, but it's just, I'm still shocked. And to this day, I still hear and I still see some of these biases. And I'm like, come on, we're in like a new century. Why are we still dealing with these things? Why are we still having to discuss this? I feel like as humankind, we should have already progressed in that manner. So I think that's one of the things I would tell myself, a younger me, hey, don't dwell on some of these issues. There's still a lot of bias. You're still going to overcome them. Just, get over it. And I'll tell you, one of the things that's the hardest to see, and it's from the female pilots themselves. Because we don't have a lot of us on the premise. And so sometimes when we see another one, we're all like, oh, hey, how are you? Oh, are you on this? Are you on that? Like, let's chat. Maybe we can find, the 6 degrees of separation. We can talk about something else. And I've had a couple of them where they're just like, excuse me, I don't know you. And why are you even talking to me? Mm. And then I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to offend you. I was just trying to, make a new friend, I guess. I've got my friends. I don't need new friends. Bye.
Oh my God.
Oh, okay. Yes. And so funny, I never see, and maybe that's just a me thing I'm trying to make.
I always say, and not in regards to gender, but I always say that we as aviators, the minute we pin those little wings, those little decorative display of accomplishment on our shirts, we have to recognize that not everyone can be a pilot. Forget airline pilot for a second. Not everyone can command an aircraft in 3-dimensional space in coordination, following rules, regulations, laws of aerodynamics, to stay focused on the task at hand when you have multiple distractors coming at you constantly. Mm-hmm. It's a very, I don't even want to say privileged profession, but it's a very specific profession that only a select few have the coordination, the technical aptitude, and the ability to do it. So we have to stick together. We have to know that I work for the company I work for because they hired me. It might have been my goal. Some of us make that goal. Some of us don't. They end up at another company because they hired them, and then they sometimes people go down a path, their life changes and their pathway changes. And so their goal maybe never gets achieved, but at least they're flying. And we have to recognize that we're all special in that we have achieved so much. And especially when you're at the tip of the pyramid at a main line or a legacy carrier, and you see another pilot, regardless of their gender, regardless of the color of their skin, regardless of their economic or social background, they're a fellow pilot, and we need to stick together. And to hear stories where it's a personality that just doesn't bode well being friendly to others, it's kind of disappointing.
Yeah, it's a bummer.
Yeah. So what has been your favorite experience behind the controls of an airplane to date?
My favorite experience. I can't. It's really hard to narrow it down. But I'm going to say the very first time I flew a 757. And the reason is because coming back to the moment where I had an epiphany and I saw that airplane landing and the back of my hairs just stood. When I finally got my type rating and I got to fly that airplane, there was this feeling that the only way I can describe it is a feeling of I'm home. This is where I belong. This is it. This is what I've dreamed of and I've been able to achieve. And oh my God, I could not stop smiling. I still feel I can't stop smiling every time I think of, wow, that I did it. I'm on this plane, I'm landing, and I'm landing at the same airport that I saw this. It was just, it was a full circle. So that is probably my favorite experience. I mean, I've had great experiences, great crews that I've been with, awesome times in places like Lima, Belize, even Paramaribo, which a lot of people don't seem to like. There's just so much stuff to do out there. And there's so many things to learn from the different cultures that it's just amazing. I can't think of, bad moments outweighing all the good ones that I've had.
Yeah. And that's kind of, to come full circle like that and to experience that. I mean, does someone have that on video anywhere? Because that would have been like a made for TV drama right there. That's a great story. Now you were on the 7.5 you mentioned. How long were you on that aircraft?
2.5 years, almost 3.
And is that because they ended up parking it after the COVID situation? Yeah.
Yes.
And is that when you upgraded? Is when they parked the 7.5, and then you said, "Okay, I'll go to the Airbus as a captain"?
Well, no, I've said at that point I could have gone captain, but I didn't want to commute. So I went as FO.
Mhm.
And then I was like, I'm just going to wait here. Ideally, I wanted to be wide body FO and just travel a little bit more to the Europe and some other destinations I haven't been to. Also, I didn't want to have the full responsibility just yet of being a captain because of my kids and everything else that I have going on at home. But I threw my name in the hat a little sooner than I thought it was going to take place.
Yeah.
And that's when the upgrade came.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that I did it. It was actually an easy transition. I feel great on the left side. Like I said, I wish I was flying a little bit more on it. But it's fun.
Yeah.
I'm finding a different pace, different tone in the flight deck.
Yeah. So your first jet you mentioned was back in 2000 and around 2006, 2007, went over at Sandpiper. Which airplane did you start out on?
Embraer.
So you're the Embraer 145?
Yes.
Okay. And what type ratings have you held since then?
Well, I had the CRJ type rating before the Embraer 145.
Okay.
And then I stayed on the 145. So from there I did 7.3, 7.5, 7.6 Airbus.
Oh, nice. So you're going to be like Roger pretty soon. You're going to need a multiple certificates to hold all your type ratings.
Almost, yes.
Now, your children, they have seen you go through this career progression, but really they saw you were already a pilot.
Yes.
And what did they think about you flying for a living?
They don't really say much about it. They're almost like my parents. They just look from like the corner of their eye and then just, okay. I've asked them a couple times if they're maybe thinking about being pilots, and they're always like, nah. And I don't ever want to push my dream onto them because it's my dream, and I want them to find their own dream that they fulfill and have the same stories that they can talk about with excitement and glitter in their eyes. Like, let's see, my eldest is 11. He's about to turn 12. So when he was in kindergarten or first grade, I went to speak at his school. And, we do the little like career days, and I had little balls and this whole conversation. And I had, asked him many times if he wanted to know anything about airplanes. He said no. And on that particular day, as all the other kids are standing there talking and asking questions, he raises his hand and he's like, I have a question for the pilot lady. And I'm like, watching him, and I'm like, yes, sir. How may I help you? And then he's like, what happens when the engine fails? And I'm like, I was taken back because I'm like, of all the times he could have asked me that at home, he's asking me this in front of his friends, in front of all these little kids. And I'm like, so, I kind of tell him, oh, that's why we have the second engine to get us to the site. He was laughing. And then he was like, Then I asked him afterwards, I'm like, why did you ask me that in front of the kids? Like, he's like, because I wanted them to know that it's not all fun and cool, that there's thinking and there's a lot of responsibility that goes behind being a pilot as well. And I'm like, I'm sorry, are you the 6-year-old I was just dropping off earlier this morning? Like, it's
wow.
It's just so different to see it from their perspective. They know that I do that, but they don't really, we don't discuss it as much. It's not anything out of this world. I hear captains tell me that, they've walked up to little kids in front of an elevator and be like, hey, little boy, how are you? Or do you want to be a pilot just like me when you grow up? And then there was one little boy that said to him, no, that's a woman's job. And here comes the elevator opening and comes the captain, and it's a female. And so she's like, ready, Sonny, let's go. And then he's like, oh, well, that's why he assumes it's a woman's job because that's what his mom does.
Yeah.
And to me, I'm like, oh, that makes complete sense. And so I was talking to a buddy of mine. I'm like, hey, I'm going to need you to come and talk at my son's school because they really do think it's a woman's job. That's what I do. They don't see it as, that's a man's job. And the 2 times they've been on planes when we're traveling somewhere, there's been a female co-pilot. It's just the way it happens.
Yeah.
And so they do associate it with being a woman's job.
Wow.
So
I never would have thought that.
Yeah. When I heard that, I was like, oh, that makes total sense. If that's what you grew up seeing, that's what you're associating.
Yeah. Now you've mentioned, going to your son's school and, getting into programs in early child education and development, and that's the best way to kind of get the word out that anyone can be a
Hmm.
pilot. Telling your story absolutely makes a big difference in, young aviators that are not sure if they can do it because of the stereotypes that are out there. Considering the global pilot shortage that we are currently in, and it looks like it's going to last through some accounts internationally through the year 2035. What opportunities do you see need to happen in order to balance out the numbers and get more women to pursue this career?
I think there has to be a lot more of us out there talking and discussing the industry in general. Whether it is to see more women in the industry or more minorities in it, just to see pilots, more people becoming pilots, period. We have to get out there talking. We have to show them that, the way of thinking from the 70s no longer exists, that we're all in it for one another and we support each other mentally and spiritually as well as career wise, because I don't feel that we help each other out as much as we should. I don't think we talk about it, having the different paths and the walks of life. When I'm out there talking just about the industry itself and I'm doing a career day, I talk about being a pilot and I talk about, small portions of how I got here, but I also talk to them about all the other jobs that are behind the line that people don't see. Our dispatchers, the people that help our cleaning crew. Some of them, that's how they first get started.
Yeah.
Our ramp fleet service clerks, the people that are down there, and sometimes some of them have other jobs, and they only do that to be able to have the benefits of traveling to go back to their countries to see their family. That's their only way they can do that. So there's a lot of other positions at any given moment. I can think of easily like 12 to 20 jobs that are involved in that one particular flight. And so I do try to encourage them to open their minds to other ideas and other things that are out there, not necessarily pushing them to be pilots. Of course, I would love for them to be pilots and to come fly with me. I'd love that. But I'm also letting them know, listen, you don't have to just enclose yourself to the 12-mile radius you grew up in. There's a lot of other jobs and other positions out there that you can learn to do as well. If not for you, then maybe your brother or sister can use some encouraging and or support so that they can also, fulfill themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. We all are here standing on the shoulders of those aviators and mentors that came before us, that helped us make the decisions, pave the way for us. If you could celebrate and thank one individual that helped pave the way for you, who would that be and what would you tell them?
Oh, it would be that person. I didn't get his name or his phone or anything. I was standing there at Embry-Riddle on that summer of 2004. He was flight instructor, blonde, and he was actually wearing a necklace with a cross on it. And I would tell him, thank you. I am forever and ever indebted to you for your stepping outside of your comfort zone, for reaching out and speaking to me, because he didn't have to do that. He could have just shrugged it off and continued with his day. I would just say thank you. You are an amazing person. I could never thank you enough with my lifetime or my children's lifetime for what you've done for me, my family, my immediate family, and my extended family, and my generations to come. Because the things that I've progressed in and the reason that I do so well is because I give back to others. I help those that came before me. I have aunties. My mom is one of 11. And of that, I've got a ton of cousins, but I'm the only one that has a real career, not just working little side gigs. And so I help my aunties be able to see that their sacrifices were not in vain either. And we're just so grateful. It's because of what he did that day, of him taking the time out to speak to me, to guide me. I don't think that I would be here if I had not come upon him on that particular afternoon.
Yeah. Yeah. It really is amazing when we stop and think about it. What little what a little event that might have seemed kind of really
Insignificant.
small at the time. Now, I mean, it affected so many lives. So wow, and thank you so much for sharing that story and for sharing your story with all of us.
Thank you.
Now, you live out of a suitcase
I do.
when you're flying. Okay. Earlier you said, after retirement, pilots don't last very long. Usually, I think the 2 or 3 years after retirement is kind of a staggering statistic. And I believe that if you just continue to live out of your rollerboard for the rest of your life and drag that thing around the parking lot once in a while, you'll live longer. And all joking aside, you got to keep moving. This is a very stagnant job. We sit in that very comfortable seat for 4 or 5 hours a day, if not more, and we're not moving. And when you get older, you're losing that muscle mass, and you also do less and less exercise. So, for me, it's running. I enjoy going on a layover, going out and exploring the city that I'm in with an outdoor run. Can't always do that. So those days I try to hit a gym or hit a pool and swim some laps or do whatever. What do you do in order to stay fit while you're out on the flight line?
I work my hands a lot when I'm dipping my cups a little bit. I'm just kidding.
You're drinking that cerveza?
Just a little bit. No, I kind of like you. I do a little bit of everything. I'd like to say I'm a runner, but I'm not very good at it. I get shin splints a lot. And my friends say it's my posture. It's because I'm a little well endowed on the upper half, so I don't have correct posture. Sometimes I like to ride a bike. So that's a little bit of a lower impact, kind of like spinning. I listen to a lot of music. And so I walk on the treadmill while I'm listening to music. I feel like that just helps distract me. I do love to explore, though. That is one thing I'm an avid fan of. I'll walk up and down little trails. And like you said, sometimes we can't go out and explore in certain areas if it's not safe, or if I don't feel like I'm secure, or there's too many people that I can't either outrun or outpunch. I don't go in that direction. I turn back around towards the hotel. So I do try to just do little things. I've started doing a little bit of weights. Again, I'm not very good at it, and I don't want to get bulky. My husband's worst fear is that I'm going to become this super ripped girl, which I don't know that would ever happen because I enjoy food way too much. But I think just a little walks in the morning, it doesn't offset everything from sitting on the job, but it does enough where I can feel the endorphins release, and I feel like, okay, I did enough for today, and I'm offsetting that. I do like walking a lot, though. I enjoy that.
Yeah. And here's what you do: go find yourself a picture of one of these Miss Olympia fitness models, the big buff chicks, and put it on the refrigerator. And when your husband says, "Well, what's that for?" I go, "Oh, that's my goal."
Oh yeah, he freaks out. He's like, "What?" Sometimes I'll come home and because I get really pink like a tomato, from cardiovascular, and he's like, "What's going on?" And I'm like, "I think I overdid it a little much, overexerted myself." He's like, "I told you, you look just fine." I'm like, "I appreciate that, babe. Thanks." But I have to offset the sitting because sometimes when you sit for too long, you can feel it. You remember, this might be showing my age, a Dumb and Dumber movie where they're stuck together because, he peed himself and it was cold and all that.
Yeah.
So sometimes, from sitting too long on those long flights to Lima, when there's only two of you, you're getting off and you're getting up off that chair and you're all frozen and you're crack.
Yeah.
So I do try to get up in the flight deck, and that's something we can do in the Airbus, not so much in a 737. I try to get up every so often and try to touch my toes a little in a little yoga position and just kind of stretch a little bit because it's just necessary. You've got to get the blood circulating.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your insight. This has been eye-opening to hear your story in aviation. I truly appreciate it. I know Rob and Roger as well were inspired by your story, by your humble beginnings, and how you overcame so much adversity to gain this position, to earn this position. So I want to thank you. Is there anything out there that, for a final thought, that you can tell some young girl listening to this podcast? Because I know there's at least one out there somewhere, maybe. I don't know.
I think for final thoughts, let's say I want to say tranquila. I've been telling myself this a little bit more. I feel like there's many times where I'm just like, go, 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 drive. And then I don't know if it's the type A in me. I always thought I was more of a type B, a little bit mellow. But tranquila, it's going to happen. Things are going to occur when they're meant to occur. Just be open to the opportunities. And when that opportunity comes knocking, don't be afraid to open that door. Because sometimes we'll have opportunities that we're just too scared to take. And sometimes we're just not ready to take those leaps of faith that are the ones that are going to get us where we really want to be. Stepping outside of our comfort zone is huge. And I think I saw this in a recent kids movie where it said, just don't let fear be the driving factor of your future. You have to learn how to deal with that so that you can have a future. Otherwise, you'll never have an actual life.
Yeah.
And so I'm grateful to you, Tony, for having me, to Rob, Roger, and to the audience out here for listening to my stories. I still feel like my humble beginnings are still my humble ends. I am just so grateful and blessed every single day that I get to call myself a pilot, that I get to be out here flying with you guys. And having these amazing opportunities to learn of new cities that I've only read in books about. I mean, Cedar Rapids was a real place. I could not believe it when I went there. I'm still in shock that I get to do this. I feel like somebody's going to come by one day and pinch me and say, hey, get out of my seat.
Oh. Well, I don't think that's going to happen anytime for your future. I mean, you really have done a fantastic job paving the way. And I just want to say thank you for coming on the show today. We'd love to have you again, tell your more of your story. I'm sure there's a lot more there. And I want to thank all of you out there for taking the time to listen to this podcast with us. Please help us out by sharing this podcast online and with your friends. Be sure to subscribe or follow to the Squawk Ident podcast on whatever platform you're listening on. We also love receiving listener feedback. You can also send us emails and even audio feedback via our website at www.aviatortony.com. That's Alpha Victor, the number 8, Romeo Tango, Oscar November Yankee.com. There you'll find audio archives from the show, photos from the flight line, guest book photo tab, the Squawk Ident Pilot Shop, where you can find an assortment of t-shirts, hats, mugs, and much more. Small proceeds from all those sales go towards helping to finance this podcast. You can also help by contributing financially to our program right there on the homepage. YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram users, you can find us under Squawk Ident Podcast or Aviator Tony and Squawk Ident. And I want us to say one final thank you to Captain Adilia for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you guys. Have a great one.
And to all of you out there taking the time to listen to these grateful aviators. Keep the dirty side down, be safe, and take care of each other. Bye, y'all.
soon can you land? I can't tell. You can tell me, I'm a doctor.
No, I mean, I'm just not sure.
Do you know anything about planes?
Can you fly this plane and land it?
It's an entirely different kind of flying.